Julian and I would like to thank everyone for their kindness, the kindness that has been shown over the past few weeks. Every action, every show of support means so much for us, and we would like to thank you all for helping us continue this fight. It's a fight for Julian's life, a fight for press freedom, and a fight for the truth. Over the past 4 weeks, the true nature of this prosecution has come to light. Julian is being punished for performing a public service that we have all benefited from. He is in prison because he informed you of actual crimes and atrocities being committed by a foreign power. That foreign power has ripped away his freedom and has torn our family apart. That power wants to put him in incommunicado detention in the deepest, darkest hole of its prison system for the rest of his life. Julian faces a 175-year prison sentence. Most of the charges relate to simply receiving and possessing government documents. Under oath, the prosecution concedes that it has no evidence that a single person has ever come to physical harm because of these publications. Julian is not a US citizen. He has never lived there. He did not sign an oath to the US government. He should not be sent there. Julian's duty is to the public, to publish evidence of wrongdoing, and that's what he did. Terrible crimes were committed in Iraq and Afghanistan, and terrible crimes were committed at Guantanamo Bay. The perpetrators of those crimes, they're not in prison, but Julian is. Julian is a publisher. Julian is also a son. He's a friend. He's my fiancé and a father. Our children need their father. Julian needs his freedom. And our democracy needs a free press. Thank you.
They kidnap him and take him out of the jurisdiction to who knows where, and do, well, what the CIA does when it renditions. And this is a game changer going into the appeal, because it shows the true nature, the true origins, the true criminality of the U.S. actions against Julian, and it completely taints any semblance of legality of this extradition appeal that we're going into.
And I know this must be difficult for you, but how has that? What effect has that had on you? These extraordinary reports from Yahoo.
It's confirmation for what I already knew, because while we were inside the embassy, it was a very oppressive environment, and towards the end, I'm saying more or less from, I'd say, March 2018 onwards, but it became more and more so. But at the same time, there were lots of reports that Ecuador was about to force Julian out of the embassy. So essentially the Ecuadorian government under the new president, Lenin Moreno, had struck a deal with the U.S. And we know this now because just after Julian was arrested, some whistleblowers in Spain who had been working inside the embassy in the security company went first to El País and then to the police to report the illegal activities, operations that they had been carrying out against not only Julian, but his lawyers and our baby and me and my mom, and amongst other things. And so we had that side, we had kind of the operational part of what was going on, and these whistleblowers said that they were working for the CIA via, well, their contract was with Las Vegas Sands, which was owned by Sheldon Adelson, who died a few months ago. And Sheldon Adelson was Trump's and Pompeo's major financial backer. The biggest financial backer of the Trump presidency was Sheldon Adelson. And there are lots of reports about his incredible influence on Trump's policies in the Middle East. So these whistleblowers provided not just their own testimony, but a lot of data, emails, pictures, videos from those operations that they had been carrying out. And those emails show how it wasn't just incidental CCTV spying or CCTV security inside the embassy. No, it was targeted surveillance, targeting Julian's lawyers by name, recording meetings, and then physically taking them to Las Vegas, and also traveling to Virginia, where the Eastern District of Virginia court is. And so we have this extraordinary situation where the operational end of it was known to us more or less a few months into Julian being incarcerated in Belmarsh in 2019. By September, the Spanish court, High Court, it's like the equivalent of the High Court here, the Audiencia Nacional, had opened an investigation into the CEO of this company, UC Global, and had arrested him. And they conducted raids at his office and at his home. And at his home they found more material, but among the things they found were 2 handguns, one loaded with their serial numbers filed off. So we were literally inside the embassy with a group of mercenaries, and one of the things that they disclosed to the Spanish investigation is that they discussed poisoning Julian inside the embassy. And they discussed leaving the door open so that deniably he could be kidnapped from the embassy, taken out of the embassy, and they didn't know what happened. And the poison plot was being looked at, and they said that they were afraid that Julian had installed a camera inside the fridge, so it was not liable to poison his food. And that was a fridge that I was constantly eating from. I was pregnant twice during that period. And it's just... It's confirmation, but it's also bringing it back, because this was... it was a really terrifying environment. At one point, I stopped going into the embassy because it was so harassing, and I was 6 or 7 months pregnant at the time, and trying to conceal that fact, because because I didn't know how Ecuador would use it to expel Julian, if it would be used as an excuse to expose him to extradition, to drive him out, or also for my own safety. And I mean, it was very stressful. And my doctors told me I had to, take it easy because it was a very stressful environment. So from November 18, 2018, I stopped going into the embassy. And I felt that it felt like we were prey. It felt like Julian was prey. And because I was the person who was closest to Julian, I felt that I was very clearly a target. And it's clear that I was a target from the emails that the Spanish investigation has produced. There's one email that says, priority is Stella Morris. And I was followed and, probably broken into. I don't know the extent of it, but I did feel so exposed. And I felt that maybe they might beat me up or try to kill me or something to get to Julian, because they were desperate to drive him out of the embassy and into Belmarsh prison. And so now we have this extraordinary situation where we have this investigation by Yahoo News and these high-level officials that were disgusted with what was going on, what was being planned, who have now gone on record to expose what was going on. But I think it would be wrong to suggest that this is just Pompeo going rogue. In that article, there are a lot of details that should be read in detail about how the plans that were being elaborated were also to kill others in European countries. We don't know who those were. I mean, was it Kristen?
Yeah.
And the big picture here is, can the UK really extradite a person to the country that was plotting to murder him? And that's inescapable. That's an inescapable point that the courts will have to deal with ultimately. And another issue I want to emphasize is that these so-called assurances are really so-called assurances. Incorporated in that document is caveat that they might change their mind at any point. That they don't say that Julian will never be in these so-called SAMS conditions and ADX Florence. They say that we might change our mind, we might put him there anyway, subject to any act that he does. Completely undefined. Any act. What is that? The Speech Act? It's not about SAMs, Special Administrative Measures, or ADX Florence. On any given day in the United States, 80,000 people, every single day, are in solitary confinement conditions. Only 50 of them are under SAMs. 50. The conditions, the isolation that Julian faces doesn't come out of the whatever rubric you give solitary confinement. The point is that Julian would not survive extradition, and that was the conclusion of the judge. Julian is in Belmarsh prison, which is a terrible environment. He's been there for over 2.5 years. Thankfully, he can see me and the kids now regularly. But everyone knows who's had any dealings with prisons that if you get sick in prison, it can be catastrophic. So Julian is just the risk of him having some health complication could be catastrophic for him. Every single day that he is in prison is a severe risk to his life. And on your second point, the Spanish case is it's the investigation is underway, and my understanding is that they have an enormous amount of data that they're still sifting through. There are two people who are charged, the CEO and I think the chief of operations, who's a Belgian national, and I don't even know the full extent of the data that they've retrieved, but it's enormous. So the UK judge said that she would defer to the Spanish court and its findings in relation to this case. So the implications could be enormous. I was asked whether we'll see justice in this case, and the answer is we will never see justice in this case, because Julian has been so wronged that there's no possible prospect of justice. But there's a lot to be beyond Julian's freedom. There's a lot that needs to be unraveled here, and it's starting to unravel through the Spanish case, through this story that the investigation by Yahoo News. And I only see, I see this as a snowball, really. There will just be more and more information about the criminal actions and the incredible persecution that has been mounted against Julian over time. It's inevitable. And this country also needs to come clean. It needs to be scrutinized, because in that story, in that Yahoo story, it says that the British authorities were aware of some of these plans, but we don't know to what extent, which of these plans. Were they going to go along with the kidnapping or the rendition or the killing? Did they know about the company instructed to steal my baby's nappy? What do they know? What did they know? How much were they willing to go along with it? I think this is, that's your job to find out. This case it's an attack on journalism. And again, in that piece, it talked about how in 2013, U.S. authorities were trying to redefine Laura Poitras and Glenn Greenwald, but Ewan McCaskill was also working on the Snowden materials as information brokers in order to target them in a similar way to which the CIA then used the targeting of WikiLeaks by calling it a non-state hostile intelligence service. So this preceded WikiLeaks. This goes back to 2013 at least. And in 2013, the Fox News reporter James Rosen was called by the DOJ a co-conspirator with his source in the State Department. This is not just about Julian. This is a long-standing trend, and they were trying in 2013, and then in 2017 they actually did it. And now that precedent has been set, and all of you have to push back, and you have to understand that this is about your jobs. Julian is not a U.S. citizen. He was working from this country, invited here by The Guardian to work on the Iraq war logs and the Afghan war diaries and the State Department cables. And he was publishing together with European publishers. He has nothing to do with the United States, except he was exposing their crimes. And now they're using their laws to go after him extraterritorially. And just because it's called the Espionage Act, it doesn't mean, I see this reported sometimes, he's accused of espionage. He's not accused of espionage in the normal sense of the word. That's just what the act is called, Espionage Act. The wording is so broad that it targets journalism. And this has been, it goes back to the Pentagon Papers when they were considering going after the Washington Post and New York Times with the Espionage Act, because it's from 1917. It's incredibly broadly worded, and it doesn't suggest that when you publish, you're publishing, it doesn't suggest that journalists are funneling information to a foreign power to benefit them. No, the wording says just disseminating information, and they've used that disseminating to mean publishing. Julian is accused of receiving, possessing, and publishing information to the public. That's not espionage. So I ask you, please, to stop suggesting that Julian's accused of espionage, because it's false. He's accused of journalism. Well, his home is with me and the kids, and our home is wherever Julian is safe. And so far, Australia has done nothing to ensure Julian's safety. They haven't even asked the Trump administration, now the Biden administration, to drop this case. I mean, what does it take? The US was plotting to kill an Australian journalist, an Australian an Australian winner of the Walkley Award, which is like Australia's Pulitzer Prize. What does it take? I mean, of course Julian wants to go back to Australia, but Australia has to do something. The government has to do something to save his life.
Would he feel safe in the UK?
I mean, after what we've read, how can Julian feel safe? How can we feel safe? It's the criminal, lawless behavior. There has to be a signal from somewhere that this is completely intolerable and unacceptable. I've said it before, we have a right to exist. But so far, no one is acknowledging that right.
So, just finally, if you're ruling out Australia and the UK, does Julian have anywhere to go?
I'm not ruling out those countries. I'm saying that they have to step up. You know, not just Australia and the UK. You know, this affects European countries too. That Yahoo News story said that they were planning to kill people in European countries for publishing. You know, if that doesn't warrant some kind of statement about the European countries should do more, the European Union should do more. But there is a lot of support. I mean, Julian has the support from the biggest organizations, RSF, of course, Amnesty, Human Rights Watch. All the press freedom organizations are firmly behind Julian. The German federal human rights commissioner issued a statement that's very unusual. The Council of Europe human rights commissioner has issued statements calling for Julian's freedom and for the case to be dropped. The UN Special Rapporteur on Torture has repeatedly raised this case. The OSCE, you know, this is not a marginal issue. Everyone who looks into it understands that this is our basic freedoms. The press's basic freedoms to publish freely without fearing incarceration for the rest of your lives. The political culture in this country and in the rest of Europe to be able to scrutinize what the government doesn't want you to scrutinize. Sorry. It's an ongoing struggle for him inside the embassy. Sorry, I didn't slip. Inside the prison. It's very hard, especially when during the lockdown where he wasn't able to see us. Thankfully, we've been able to have regular contact, even when we weren't able to physically go to the prison. I think we all feel that something's got to give. I mean, at what point? What does it take? For Julian to be released, if not, that the admission that he was almost killed by the country that's trying to extradite him.
Sorry, do you feel you can talk freely to him? Because is this via Zoom? Do you feel that you can actually have...
No, all our conversations are... I mean, Belmarsh prison is they call it Britain's Guantanamo, and it was built in the 1990s to house IRA convicts. Everything is severely monitored, even though it shouldn't be. Even the video conferencing that he has with his lawyers, recently discovered that it's backdoored by design, just for technical reasons supposedly, but that means that it can be hacked even if they weren't officially monitoring it. So there's just, of course, it's not. When I visit him with the kids or without the kids, the hall where you visit is a big hall, and everyone is receiving visits at the same time. It's about 40 prisoners at the same time. There are cameras everywhere, and probably microphones as well. I mean, that's the assumption, and so it's. The embassy was similar,
You must feel like you're never going to be free of surveillance.
It stays with you. It's this threat, this constant menace stays with you. And, it's...
All right, thank you. Latika, did you have a question?
Thank you. Latika Murphy from the Sydney Morning Herald. Stella, is it the case, given all that you've been saying about the lack of signals for safety if Julian is free, for you and your family, that you would feel safer living in a country like Russia compared to Britain and Australia?
No. I don't know. Julian wants to be able to go to Australia to see his family. His mom, who he hasn't seen for years, because she can't travel. And the UK, Europe actually has formal safeguards precisely for situations where journalists are the object of assassination plots and so on. The formal mechanisms exist. And it's a test. Is it really down to politics, or do these principles actually mean something? Do these values actually mean something? And I see more and more, as I said, all these major organizations and the OSCE and the Council of Europe and so on. This is not. These are significant institutions, and there's a lot of support politically. But we're not there yet, and I want to see an affirmative show of principle by the organizations, by the countries involved, that this is intolerable, that killing, we were all outraged and denounced what happened to Jamal Khashoggi that can't depend on which country kills, right? It attaches itself to the victim. And so, this is a real test. By April 2017, the CIA, the Central Intelligence Agency, which is the one tasked to find out whether people, organizations are agents for foreign powers, had concluded conclusively that WikiLeaks was not a Russian agent, that it had nothing to do with Russia. And that's why they had to invent a new term, non-state hostile intelligence service, emphasis on non-state. Enough is enough. The CIA then, of course, waged a propaganda war, because the CIA has a massive propaganda unit, which we all know, and then we had former CIA officials on CNN and on MSNBC and so on, pushing a narrative which they knew was false, because that was the CIA's way of attacking WikiLeaks, of undermining WikiLeaks, of pushing the Russiagate narrative, even though they knew it was false, even though it created enormous societal and political havoc in the US, just because it was waging a war against WikiLeaks, and they knew this Russiagate narrative was a way of undermining WikiLeaks and Julian. In order to assassinate a person, you have to assassinate their character first. It was part of setting the ground for his extradition, setting the ground for reducing political support, of putting a question mark over WikiLeaks' work or motivations, which they knew was false. So, enough. The CIA is the agency that is tasked with finding out this intelligence. And they concluded, and it's in the Yahoo News story, they concluded that there was no link, that WikiLeaks is independent. And because WikiLeaks publishes things that the US government doesn't like, it was fair game. That's what happened.
Hi, everyone, and thank you for coming today again for day 2. Yesterday was the day when the US government was allowed to attempt to relitigate the points that we had already settled at the Magistrates' Court in January. It was painful to have to sit through the US government's empty grounds to take this appeal. But today we're going to hear Julian's defense team's response to those empty claims. And the story about the plans to assassinate and kidnap Julian from London will be discussed in court today, so I urge you to stay tuned and follow the proceedings online. And I've seen some reports that the US government has denied these plans. In fact, the US government, the White House, refused to comment and referred reporters to the CIA, which also refused to comment. And Mike Pompeo, who is the CIA director, who was the architect of these plans to assassinate Julian and kidnap and rendition him from London, in fact, effectively confirmed them, because he called for the 30 sources who had spoken to the 3 investigators to be prosecuted. And the implication is they have violated the Espionage Act, and therefore, if there are grounds to prosecute them, that means that the news was true. And finally, the US Congress is investigating the CIA story. So it's not something that can be dismissed out of hand by claiming the US government has denied it, because they haven't. Pompeo has confirmed it, and the US Congress is investigating. And there are questions that need to be answered about what the UK government, what their involvement was in these plans. Because that story says that the UK government was informed and to a degree willing to go along with some of these plans. So which plans were they willing to go along with? There are talks about the UK authorities being the ones doing the shooting. What is going on here? We're talking about a journalist who took political asylum for fear of the political persecution that the U.S. was taking against him, for fear of torture and inhumane and degrading treatment, for fear of being put in prison for the rest of his life, for exposing the crimes of the U.S. government. And then he was kidnapped. He was kidnapped in the end on the 11th of April 2019. He was arrested by British officials, and immediately the U.S. indictment was revealed. So what is the involvement of the UK government in Julian's political persecution here? The UK courts are now faced with this decision about whether they can extradite a journalist to the country that was plotting to kill him. It would be unthinkable that they would go along with it. I hope that justice will be served. Thank you.
Thank you, Stella! Thank you, Stella!
Hi, everyone. Yes, this morning we were able to counter all of the lies that the U.S. presented yesterday. These lies are there to distract, to take up time, and to reduce our ability or our time to respond and draw attention to the issues that matter, to the true nature of the political persecution in this case, which is being furthered through the UK courts. We were able to go through the timeline of events since Julian's arrest, or even before that, how he had been spied on in the embassy. His lawyers had been targeted by name. The Spanish lawyer's office was broken into. His lawyer's notes were seized and copied. Our eldest son's DNA was instructed to be stolen. My mother was followed. I was followed. Julian was spied on in every little detail. And we knew this almost as soon as Julian was arrested, because whistleblowers who had been working in these illegal operations couldn't live with themselves, and they went to the press and they went to the Spanish police and they said that they had taken part in these illegal operations against Julian. And that started coming out in 2019, and it is in that context that the medical expert was concerned for my safety, because at the same time the Spanish courts had evidence that there were discussions of poisoning Julian and kidnapping him from the embassy. Now, just a few weeks ago, we learned that on the other side of the Atlantic, at CIA headquarters, these plans, these operations, were being planned under the directorship of Mike Pompeo. We have an extraordinary situation where we have evidence of the people who are carrying out the operations in this Spanish company in the embassy, and we have the people who were planning these operations, including planning to assassinate Julian, planning to kidnap him, planning to rendition him, planning shootouts in CIA headquarters in Virginia, just a few miles from where the court is, where Julian would be tried if he were to be extradited. The US wants to take Julian to the Eastern District of Virginia, to an area that is full of security contractors, where the CIA is based, where you can expect what the jury will look like. To extradite Julian would certainly mean that he would be convicted of journalism under the Espionage Act. This case is just about journalism. It's just about the persecution of a journalist. Thanks. Hi everyone, can you hear me? If you can't hear me, put up your hand and I'll try to speak up. The US, if the US wants to treat Julian fairly and well, they should drop this case. They should release Julian from prison because he is suffering right now. In court today, Mark Summers, QC, Julian's defense, said that there is nothing normal about this case. There is nothing normal about this case. And it's not just the defense that says that. The CPS told Sweden in 2010, please do not think that we are treating this as a normal extradition case. This is a political persecution that has used the law, extradition law, as a tool to further its political agenda. To take revenge on a journalist for what? For the publications that he is now indicted over. Publications that revealed war crimes, targeted assassinations, rendition, torture, but also the US subversion of the judiciary in Germany, in Spain, in Italy, when those judges, those investigators, had the gall to investigate those same crimes, to investigate CIA rendition and torture of their citizens. This US extradition case has been falling apart since the moment it started. Because it was born rotten, it was born at a time when the CIA was plotting to assassinate Julian. And it is also proving to be devastating for the US in the courts. Not only because the US prison system and its inhumane conditions is exposed before these courts in its full barbarity, but also because the crimes that have been undertaken by the US government against Julian are also exposed before these courts. Today, we were able to air in court Mike Pompeo's plans, his sketches and options to assassinate Julian in London. To assassinate a journalist in this city for doing his job because he exposed their crimes. This country cannot tolerate, should not tolerate, the targeted assassination of journalists for doing their jobs. This should be obvious. We shouldn't be here. I hope the courts reach the right conclusion. But I also call on the US government to not just say they defend media freedom, to not just say journalists shouldn't be killed or imprisoned, but actually they should walk the walk, not just talk the talk. They should drop this case. They should free Julian. Thank you.